Hello everyone. I am honored to be here and I thank the organizers for inviting me here. What I'll try to do here is to look at a specific case, which is the Turkish case, and how the negative effects of nationalism have been countered and tried to be ameliorated by the peace-building activities of the Hizmet Movement, which is a faith-based transnational movement. As you might already know, everybody has been affected and influenced by nationalism in one way or another, and the glorious Ottoman Empire was no exception. In the Ottoman times, several different ethnic, religious, and lingual minorities lived for centuries in peaceful coexistence, despite some difficulties and, of course, turbulent times and problems. But with the emergence of nationalism, what we've seen was that the Ottoman Empire started shattering, and the Turks also became nationalists. And after the collapse of the Ottoman Empire, they also started their own nation-building project. In the Ottoman times, in the first Muslim parliament that was opened in 1876, about 40% of the deputies were non-Muslims. And they were democratically elected, and they had their own languages, and in their own schools and in their own educational systems, they could teach and educate in their own language and so on. But with the Turkish nationalist project, unfortunately, Turks also were poisoned by nationalism. Some people call it negative nationalism, but I'm not so sure if there is actually much difference between positive nationalism and negative nationalism, because the borders are so thin and it is easy to penetrate this border in difficult and turbulent times at individual and societal levels. Anyway, so while Turks decided to build a modern nation, they focused on Turks, of course, Sunnis, and Muslims. And this is what I call LAST, similar to WASP, White Anglo-Saxon Protestant. In the Turkish case, it is laicist, Atatürkist, Sunni Turk. And according to this conceptualization, the best citizen, the palatable citizen, the favorite citizen, is the one that is simultaneously laicist, Atatürkist, Sunni, and Turk. And in its constitutive other side, you would find non-Muslims, you would find non-Sunnis, such as heterodox Alevis, you would find leftists, liberals, also so people with different ideologies other than laicist Atatürkists. And in this conceptualization, because it has its constitutive other with Gramscian apparatuses, all others have been tried to be assimilated into the last. So in a way, last, even though was exclusivist, but that doesn't mean that it wasn't open to assimilation. So as long as you could assimilate into Turkishness, as a Kurd, you would be welcomed in the Turkish parliament, you could even be a president or a prime minister. But when you said that you had also Kurdish identity, or if you had an accent and so on, then you would be discriminated against by the establishment. And it is so funny that even in one of the cases of the Court of Cassations, which is one of the Supreme Courts in Turkey, non-Muslims are referred as, with an oxymoronic terminology, alien citizens. And these non-Muslims have been living in Turkey for more than about 5,000 years or more, well before the advance of Turks to the Anatolia. So what happened at the end of the day was that this nation-building project created turbulence, polarization, and division in society. And this, the Gulen movements or the Hizmet movements, one of the decisive points is that it works towards repairing these divisions and polarizations and so on. And the movement, which is originated in Turkey around the ideas of Fethullah Gi.ilen, who is a follower of tradition in Turkey, but who is simply renewing the tradition according to tempo-spatial context in Turkey. But this also follows in the tradition of such as great Sufi philosopher Mevlana Celaleddin Rumi, similar to the Immanuel Kant's idea of cosmopolitanism, who would say that my foot, one of my feet, is in the center, in my faith, in my country, and so on, but my other foot travels around 72 nations. And he would say that, come, whoever you are, come. So with this idea of not only tolerance, but acceptance and accepting people as they are. So Gülen is simply trying to revive this Muslim tradition with an idea of inviting people to his ideas and trying to find a common ground with speaking softly, which is a Quranic concept. And in one of the verses, God asks Prophet Moses and his brother Aaron to go to the Pharaoh and talk to him nicely and softly. So in a turbulent time between 1970s and 1980, when leftists and rightists people were killing each other, and at that turbulent, bloody decade, more than 5,000 youth lost their lives because of ideological divisions. And Gülen would say that victory over the civilized is by convincing them. So violence is not an option, and when you resort to violence and when you speak to people with unpleasant words and so on, you would simply create a negative reaction among them. So even though the Kemalist state used Gramscian apparatuses such as the media, such as the education, such as religion, even religion, because it's controlled by the state in Turkey, even though it calls it a secular state, the Gülenic answer to this hegemony creation and the Gülenic answer to this creating or manufacturing concept of the people, if we use Antonio Gramsci's terminology or Noam Chomsky's terminology of manufacturing the consent and create a kind of normalcy, to use French philosopher Pierre Bourdieu's concept, or a kind of common sense, which is not authentic, which is not actually real, but it is fabricated by the hegemonic power, which is the state. So the Gülenic answer was against this was to create a kind of bridges by using its social capital. So first of all, the movement was revolving around the bonding capital, so people would come together with their religious ideas and so on, but as you might all know, and if you follow the works of Bourdieu, James Coleman, or American political scientist Robert Putnam, you would know that without any bridging social capital or linking social capital, bonding capital could create chaos, and it could also divide society. And as in the Gülenic Weltanschauung, the constitutive other is not others, non-Muslims and so on, but the constitutive other is attributes, such as ignorance, such as disunity, such as poverty. So Gülenic answer was to establish institutions such as schools to fight against ignorance. And when we say ignorance, this includes, of course, fighting against ignorance towards other civilizations, other understandings, intolerance, exclusivist ideas, nationalism, and all others. And with institutions such as Kimse Yok Mu, they would go and help to the needy and work against the poverty and so on. And with the media institutions, and the movement also would work towards building bridges with others. So even in the 1970s, Gulen would advise his listeners, his students, and his sympathizers that you should go and talk to these so-called communists. And in one of his circles, there was a guy who would say that we should go and beat them up, these communists, because they would invite Soviet Union to invade our country. And Gulen told them that, look, this is not helpful, and if you create chaos in society, it is a kind of terrorism and anarchy, and this is totally against Islam. So instead of going to the streets and helping the hegemonic powers who would simply making you killing each other, you should go and talk to them nicely and politely. And another person simply came forward and he said that, oh, my brother, if you went to the streets and tried to beat people up, I would be among them yesterday. Yesterday I was with them, but because one of your friends convinced me, today I am with you. So the movement worked towards this, and in early 1990s, well before 9/11, Gulen started a new initiation in Turkey, which was a first in the modern history of Turkey after the collapse of the Ottoman Empire. And as I said, because non-Muslims were treated as enemies, as the constitutive others, Muslims, including the practicing Muslims, wouldn't look at non-Muslims in a polite manner, to say the least. So Gulen said that our citizens, even though they are non-Muslims, they are our brothers. We should go and talk to them and try to find a common ground. And in 1997, he visited the Pope in Vatican. And this was a first in the modern Turkish history. And many people were shocked and surprised, including the Turkish secularists and Kemalists. And Gulen paved way for the establishment of the Journalists and Writers Foundation, and one of the platforms of this foundation is Abant platform, and again, for the first time in modern Turkish history, leftist, right-wing, communist, socialist, liberal, and so on, practicing Muslims as well, intellectuals, journalists, writers, and so on, would come together, and around the same table, they would discuss sensitive issues such as secularism, such as state, society, religion issues, and so on. And with these ideas in mind, many people who were influenced by the ideas of Gulen went abroad to establish educational institutions. And as you might already know, in these schools, in more than 140 countries, different minorities, people from different backgrounds, lingual, religious, and ideological backgrounds could come together and study in the same classroom. So this is not only just dialogue in mere words, in a kind of at a discursive level, but it is a dialogue in action. And now we started seeing the fruits of this dialogue in action. So in many countries around the world, you will see that students who were graduated from these schools are becoming teachers in the same schools and trying to inculcate the values that they learned in these schools from the Hizmet Movement students. So in a way, the Gulen movement or the Hizmet movement is contributing towards peace building, not but just with rhetoric, but in real action in the field. And it is one of the hopes. Of course, there are all sorts of similar projects around the world, and Hizmet Movement is only one of them. But with these projects, we can be hopeful about a Huntingtonian world that only promises us division and fights. Thank you.